The year is 1700. The world is vast and yet smaller than it has ever been. Winds carry news across oceans, caravans cross deserts, their shadows long on the sand, and empires rise and wane beneath the same stars that watched over ancient kings. It is an age of transformation, of silk and smoke, of letters written by candlelight and voyages that reshape maps. The hum of human life, from Kyoto to Cairo, from the Thames to the Amazon, rises like a quiet heartbeat under the turning heavens. Our story tonight is not of kings and wars alone, but of people. The ordinary souls who rise with the dawn, dream in secret, and sleep beneath the same uncertain sky. Through their eyes, we'll walk the streets of empires, taste the dust of journeys, and feel the pulse of a world caught between old and new. Welcome to History for Sleep, where the past drifts softly into dreams. Do not forget to write out in the comments where you are listening from. I'd love to know in which places around the world I am helping people sleep even more soundly. Plus, if you like what I do here, subscribe now, and let tomorrow's dream begin where this one ends. Chapter 1. Kyoto, Japan, the Lantern Maker's Morning. Dawn creeps gently over the tiled rooftops of Kyoto. The mist from the Kamo River drifts through narrow alleys, softening the world to watercolor hues. A young man named Kenji steps into the chill air, lantern frame balanced on his shoulder, his bare feet soundless on the wooden veranda. Kenji is 22, a craftsman like his father before him. His family workshop sits behind the Nishijin textile district, where the air always smells faintly of dye and cedar wood. The year is Hoi 3, in the reign of the shogun Tokugawa Tsunayoshi, the dog shogun, as the people quietly call him, for his strange edicts of kindness to all living things. Inside the workshop, his mother grinds rice glue in a small stone bowl. Sheets of washi paper, thin as breath, hang drying across bamboo poles. Kenji dips a brush into cinnabar pigment, the red that glows like sunset fire, and paints a small crane in mid-flight. His lines are steady, practiced, meditative. Kyoto in 1700 is both ancient and reborn. Less than 50 years earlier, fire swept through the city, leaving charred temples and blackened homes. Yet the city has risen again, as it always does. Merchants and monks walk side by side. Samurai pass quietly on morning patrols. Bells ring from Kiyomizu-dera, the temple on the hill. By midday, Kenji carries a bundle of finished lanterns through the market. The streets are alive, women in indigo kimono bargaining for vegetables, children chasing paper balls, itinerant poets reciting haiku for coin. A monk stops to admire Kenji's work, tracing the air above the painted crane. Each stroke, the monk says softly, is a prayer. Kenji bows. He sells his lanterns to the tea house keeper by the Gion Bridge, the same woman who buys them each new year. She pays in Silvermon coins, smooth and cool in his palm. As evening descends, Kenji walks home beneath a sky deepening to indigo. He lights one of his own lanterns and hangs it by the window. The glow spills onto the tatami floor, warm as a small sun. He sits beside it, listening to the faint sound of a shamisen drifting from a nearby house. For a moment, the world is perfectly still, just paper, light, and the quiet hum of his own heart. He wonders what lies beyond the sea, a thought he quickly dismisses. Few ever leave Japan. Yet somewhere in his dreams, the world beyond Kyoto's mountains feels strangely close. The wind shifts. The lantern's flame dances, flickers, and fades into the darkness. Chapter 2. London, England, the Printer's Apprentice. Morning fog coils through the streets of London, heavy with coal smoke and the smell of wet stone. It is the first year of a new century, and the city hums with both progress and plague memories that still linger like ghosts. In a cramped print shop on Fleet Street, a young apprentice named Thomas Gray wipes ink from his fingers. He has been awake since before dawn, setting type for a pamphlet announcing the upcoming publication of the Tatler, a new journal of wit and observation. Thomas is 16, curious and restless. He was born after the Great Fire of 1666, but hears of it often, how his master once watched the sky turn red and saw St. Paul's fall in flames. Now the city stands rebuilt, wider streets, grander houses, and an unshakable belief that London will never burn again. He works beside the iron press, its wooden lever squeaking with each pull. Rows of lead letters, tiny soldiers of words, march neatly in trays. The air smells of oil, paper, and ambition. "Careful with that, boy," his master mutters, leaning over. The old longs catches readers' eyes. "We're printers, not poets. Clarity first." Outside, carts rumble over cobblestones. The bells of St. Bride's ring noon. Thomas carries a bundle of freshly printed sheets into the open air. Across the street, coffee houses buzz with chatter, merchants debating trade routes to India, scholars arguing over Newton's new ideas about gravity, sailors boasting of storms survived. London in 1700 is a city between worlds. Old taverns beside glittering new theaters, quills beside microscopes, superstition beside science. The East India Company grows rich, newspapers multiply, and whispers of Jacobite plots circle like crows above the Thames. At dusk, Thomas slips out, clutching a small hand-printed poem of his own, a secret work he printed after hours. He walks along the river's edge, where lamps shimmer on the water. Reading by their dim light, he dreams of his words traveling far beyond London, maybe even across the Atlantic to the colonies. When he returns home, his mother is already asleep by the fire. He tucks the poem beneath a loose floorboard, his small rebellion against a world that prints the words of others, but silences his own. In the stillness, the sound of the printing press echoes in his memory, steady, rhythmic, eternal, the heartbeat of a city that never truly sleeps. The fog rolls eastward, drifting over the water, carrying with it the smell of ink, of ambition, of dreams pressed into paper, and far across the sea, another dawn begins to rise. Chapter 3. The Gold Coast, West Africa, the Weaver of Anamabo. The sun rises heavy and gold over the palm trees of the coast. The waves of the Atlantic beat against dark rocks, and the smell of salt and smoke fills the air. In the town of Anamabo, near the Gulf of Guinea, a young woman named Efua wakes to the soft creak of the loom. Her mother is already at work, weaving narrow strips of patterned cloth that shimmer like water when held to the light. Efua's hands move rhythmically, thread over thread, blue against white, then a line of deep crimson. The patterns have names. Adwini Essa. My skill is exhausted, meaning perfection beyond imitation. It is the year 1700, and the Akan states along the coast are thriving. Traders come from the inland Ashanti forests carrying gold dust, ivory, and kola nuts. Europeans arrive by ship, Dutch, English, Danish, their flags fluttering over whitewashed forts along the shoreline. They trade textiles and rum, iron and muskets, their language is a blur of promises and threats. Efua does not go near the harbor. Her brother once did, and did not return. The old women whisper that the ships are hungry, that they take not only gold, but people. Her father, a quiet man with wise eyes, carves stools for local chiefs. Each stool tells a story of power, of lineage, of the soul that sits upon it. When the British traders arrive to bargain for gold, he bows politely but keeps his eyes on his tools. A tree, he says, does not trade its roots. At midday, Efua carries a bundle of finished cloth to the market square. The air hums with music and chatter, drummers playing the talking drum, women calling prices, the smell of roasted plantain and palm wine thick in the air. She lays out her work beneath a tree. The cloth catches the sun and glows. A woman from a nearby village buys 2 pieces for a wedding, one for the bride, one for the groom. As evening falls, Efua walks to the edge of the water. The horizon burns orange. In the distance, a ship waits, its sails black against the sunset. She wonders what kind of people live beyond that line, whether they, too, look out over the sea at night and think of home. When darkness settles, she returns to her loom. The sound of waves becomes her rhythm again, steady, endless, like time itself. The surf beats against the sand, steady as a heartbeat. The sea takes, and it gives, gold, stories, memory. The night grows quiet except for the whisper of the loom and the sigh of the wind through palm fronds. Chapter 4. Istanbul, Ottoman Empire. The calligrapher's silence. The morning sun spills over the domes of Istanbul, turning them to bronze. The muezzin's call echoes between marble courtyards, and pigeons scatter in soft clouds from the minarets of the Blue Mosque. In a small shop tucked behind the Grand Bazaar, an aging calligrapher named Yusuf ibn Selim prepares his reed pen. He trims it carefully with a small knife, dips it in ink made from soot and rosewater, and tests it on parchment. The first letter he writes is a whisper. The Arabic alif, upright and perfect, the beginning of all beginnings. The year is 1112 in the Hijri calendar, 1700 by the Western reckoning. The empire still stretches across 3 continents, but its heart beats slower now. Old soldiers speak of lost wars with Austria, of new treaties signed in candlelight. Yet in Yusuf's world of ink and letters, the empire is eternal. Each stroke is an act of devotion, each curve a prayer. His apprentice, a boy of 14 named Kemal, watches silently. "Why do we begin with the alif every morning, master?" he asks. "Because," Yusuf replies, "we begin with God, even when we write of men." Outside, the bazaar comes alive. Copper merchants polish trays that gleam like mirrors. Perfume sellers crush rose petals into oil. The smell of baked bread drifts from nearby ovens. Caravans from Damascus and Isfahan bring silk and spices. Venetian traders bargain in a dozen tongues. By midday, Yusuf walks to the courtyard fountain. He washes his hands, sits in the shade, and watches the light shift over the marble. Across the city, the Topkapi Palace rises above the water, home to sultans whose power once made the world tremble. Now, whispers say, the empire needs reform, that Europe is changing faster than the old men in council can read. In the afternoon, Yusuf receives a commission. A merchant wants a verse of the Quran written on ivory for his new home. Yusuf accepts, but when the man leaves, he sighs. "They want beauty for show," he murmurs, "but not for the soul." As the sun sets, the city turns golden. From his window, Yusuf sees ships gliding along the Bosphorus, their sails pale against the darkening sky. The call to evening prayer drifts through the air, layered, resonant, eternal. He writes one last line on the parchment. All that is written fades, but the word remains. Then he sets down his pen and listens to the sound of Istanbul breathing, the murmur of markets, the bells of ships, the far-off laughter of children. When he closes his eyes, the ink still glows faintly under the lamplight, as if the letters themselves refuse to sleep. The waters of the Bosphorus shimmer beneath the stars. Across the sea, the lights of another world flicker. The night carries whispers of trade, of prayer, of dreams written in ink and silence. Chapter 5. Mexico City, New Spain, the candlemaker's daughter. Morning light spills through the iron lattice of a small courtyard in Mexico City. A rooster crows, echoing off stone walls painted in soft ochre and faded blue. At the fountain's edge kneels Isabel de la Cruz, a young woman with dark eyes and soot-stained hands. She dips wicks into melted tallow, lifts them slowly, and hangs them to cool on a wooden frame. The air smells of wax, roses, and smoke. It is the year 1700, and the city, capital of New Spain, is a vast jewel of empire. The streets teem with life. Spanish officials in fine coats, Nahua women selling flowers and maize, African porters carrying barrels of sugar and wine. The bells of the cathedral toll across the great square, their echoes rolling like distant thunder. Isabel's father was once a soldier. He lost a leg in a skirmish near Veracruz, and now tends their small candle shop by the convent of Santa Teresa. The nuns buy his candles for Mass, tall, white, and smooth as bone. To Isabel, each flame feels like a prayer she shapes with her own hands. At midday, she carries a bundle of candles through the Plaza Mayor. Merchants cry their wares, silver from Zacatecas, cacao from Chiapas, bright fabrics from Manila galleons that have crossed the Pacific. The smell of chocolate and spice fills the air. A group of children run past, chasing a wooden hoop. A friar preaches forgiveness to a crowd, and somewhere, a carriage rattles over cobblestones, its coat of arms flashing gold in the sun. Isabel stops to buy a small piece of paper from a street poet, a copla, handwritten, about love and faith. She tucks it inside her apron. She cannot read, but she likes the feel of words folded close to her heart. By afternoon the city grows hot. She returns to the workshop, where her father hums an old song from Castile. He speaks of rumors, of French ships near the Caribbean, of distant wars that seem both important and meaningless. Isabel listens but says nothing. Her world is smaller. Candles, the market, the fountain, the soft glow of prayer. When evening falls, she lights a dozen small candles in their shop window. The flames tremble in the night breeze, reflected in her eyes. Somewhere in the city, bells ring again, calling for vespers, or perhaps for something deeper. The heartbeat of a city that believes every light, however small, keeps the darkness at bay. The candles flicker, the light wavers, then softens, stretching across oceans. In another world, another dawn prepares to rise. Chapter 6. Mughal India, the miniaturist of Lahore. Dawn glows faintly over the walled city of Lahore, painting the sky with saffron light. From the minarets of the Badshahi Mosque comes the call to prayer, long and low, mingling with the cry of hawkers and the bray of donkeys in the lanes below. In a narrow courtyard shaded by neem trees, an artist named Rahim grinds pigment between smooth stones. His fingers are stained with lapis and gold dust. He is a miniaturist, a painter of exquisite detail, one of the few still working in the Mughal style, though the empire around him has begun to change. It is the reign of Emperor Aurangzeb, the last of the great Mughals, though his long rule has aged into austerity. The court no longer funds lavish art as it once did under Akbar and Jahangir. Yet Rahim persists, not for patrons or power, but because the act of painting feels like prayer. He dips his brush, made from a single squirrel hair, into a dish of color. On a sheet of burnished paper, a tiny horse takes shape, every muscle alive, every shadow exact. His apprentice watches, silent, holding his breath. The secret, Rahim whispers, is to paint as if the soul itself were smaller than the eye. Outside, the streets hum with traders and spice sellers. Persian carpets hang in doorways. The smell of cardamom and sandalwood floats through the air. Scribes sit cross-legged in the shade, copying verses of the poet Hafez. By midday, Rahim visits the great mosque. He walks beneath its red sandstone arches, where cool shadows move like water. In the courtyard, men wash their hands and faces before prayer. The marble floor is warm underfoot, polished by centuries. He thinks of the empire, vast, beautiful, fragile. He has heard stories of revolts in the Deccan, of Europeans building forts along the coasts. The old painters talk of decline, but Rahim believes beauty never dies, it only changes form. That evening, he returns home. His wife prepares lentils and rice. Their children chase fireflies through the courtyard. By lamplight, Rahim paints one final stroke, a gleaming crescent moon in the corner of his miniature. When he leans back, the image seems alive, breathing softly in gold and blue. Outside, night settles over Lahore. The call to prayer fades into silence, and the stars appear, countless, patient, eternal. A soft wind rises over the plains of Hindustan. It carries the scent of jasmine and dust, crossing mountains and deserts, oceans and empires, to lands where other lives unfold beneath the same moon. Chapter 7. Russia, the peasant of Suzdal. Dawn breaks pale over frozen fields north of Moscow. Frost glitters on bare birch trees. Smoke drifts from low chimneys. In a small wooden hut near Suzdal, a man named Ivan Petrovich wakes to the rasp of the wind through the shutters. His beard is stiff with cold. His breath clouds in the air. He pulls on thick felt boots and steps outside. The snow crunches underfoot, hard as iron. The sky is the color of pewter. Somewhere a rooster crows, muffled beneath its own feathers. It is the winter of 1700, the very year Peter the Great decreed that Russia should adopt the Western calendar. For peasants like Ivan, the decree means little. The rhythm of his life still follows the land, the thaw, the harvest, the long white sleep of winter. He tends the cows, their breath rising like ghosts. His wife, Daria, stirs a pot of kasha over the hearth. Their 2 children sleep beneath a pile of wool blankets. Icons hang in the corner, the gold paint cracked but glowing in the firelight. Before he eats, Ivan crosses himself and murmurs a prayer in Old Church Slavonic. Later, he joins the men in the village square to mend a broken sledge. They speak of rumors from the capital, of new ships being built, of beards being taxed, of foreign officers marching through Moscow in strange clothes. Some laugh, others mutter that the Tsar has lost his mind. Ivan listens quietly, hammer steady, eyes on the wood. The snow still falls, he says finally, and the earth still sleeps. The Tsar can't change that. At dusk he walks to the frozen river. Beneath the ice, water still moves, a secret, unseen pulse. He breaks a hole with his axe, kneels and lowers a bucket. The water gleams dark and pure. On the far bank, wolves call, distant and haunting. He returns home as the sky turns violet. Inside, the hut is warm, smelling of bread and pine smoke. Daria hums a hymn as she mends a sleeve. The children draw pictures in the soot on the wall, little horses, suns, and stars. When Ivan finally lies down, the logs in the stove crackle softly. Outside, snow begins to fall again, silent, endless, forgiving. The wind drifts east over the Ural forests and frozen steppes. It carries the faint ring of hammers from shipyards and the scent of pine tar, a new empire stirring in its sleep. Chapter 8. The Caribbean, the freed sailor of Port Royal. Caribbean morning breaks hot and blue, the sea bright as molten glass. Port Royal, Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth, lies half rebuilt after the great earthquake that swallowed half of it a generation ago. The harbor smells of tar, rum, and salt. A man named Kwame Dawes, known among the sailors as Joseph Dawes, wakes in a hammock slung between two palms. He was born on the Gold Coast, but taken as a boy on a slave ship. He earned his freedom fighting for an English privateer, and has stayed ever since, his body scarred by both chains and waves. He rises, washes his face in seawater, and ties a faded bandana around his head. The port hums with life. African stevedores loading sugar barrels, Spanish traders shouting prices, English officers swaggering in red coats. Ships from Bristol, Havana, and Bridgetown rock at anchor. Kwame works now as a ship's rigger. His hands are rope-burned, strong, quick. He climbs the mast like a cat, securing sails in the hot wind. The ocean is his element, wide, merciless, free. At noon, he sits on a pier, eating fried plantain and salt fish, watching gulls wheel overhead. He listens to stories of new wars in Europe, of slaves rebelling in Suriname, of pirates who still roam the Spanish Main despite the king's decrees. Somewhere a fiddle plays a slow tune that sounds both English and African. Port Royal is changing. The earthquake of 1692 sank its old taverns and churches, and men say the sea still bubbles where the dead lie beneath. Now Kingston grows across the bay, bright with promise and sin alike. In the afternoon, Kwame visits a woman who runs a small rum shop near the shore. Her name is Ama, a freedwoman from Barbados. She teases him that he's always dreaming beyond the horizon. One day, she says, the sea will take you back where you came from. He smiles. Or forward, he answers, to where no chains ever reach. When the sun sets, he walks along the beach. The sky burns crimson, then fades to indigo. The surf hisses like whispering voices. He hums a hymn he learned from a missionary once, the words half forgotten but the melody still pure. Night descends, and lanterns gleam along the docks. Somewhere a ship creaks, preparing to sail at dawn. Kwame watches the stars, the same constellations he saw as a boy across the ocean, and feels, for the first time, both rooted and unbound. The tide pulls outward, carrying his song across the dark water, toward Africa, toward Europe, toward unseen lands where other lives still stir beneath the same 1700 sky. Chapter 9. France, the watchmaker of Paris. Morning fog lingers over the rooftops of Paris, soft and silver, as the bells of Saint-Sulpice toll the hour. Inside a small workshop along the Rue Saint-Honoré, a man named Etienne Moreau leans over his bench beneath a lamp's dim flame. The ticking of clocks surrounds him, hundreds of tiny hearts beating in rhythm. Etienne is a watchmaker, apprenticed since he was 12. Now in his 30s, he earns modestly but takes pride in his craft. The year is 1700, and France under King Louis XIV stands at its golden peak, even as the first cracks show beneath the gilt. Outside the shop, carriages rattle toward Versailles, where the Sun King's court glitters with silks and intrigue. Here in Paris, however, time belongs to the artisans. He peers through a magnifying lens, adjusting a spring barely thicker than a hair. Every cog, he murmurs, is a promise. If one fails, the world stops keeping faith. His apprentice, a boy named Mathieu, hands him a tiny ruby bearing. The stones, imported from Geneva, gleam like drops of frozen wine. At midday, Etienne steps outside for bread and coffee. The street smells of yeast and damp stone. Posters announce a new opera at the Palais Royal, and pamphlets praise the genius of a philosopher named Descartes, though Etienne's interest lies not in philosophy but in precision. Time, he believes, is the truest mathematics of all. He meets his friend Claire, a widow who keeps a small bookstore nearby. They speak quietly about rumors of war in Spain, of rising taxes, of the king's newest palace project. He builds, Claire says softly, as if stone could outlast time. Etienne smiles faintly. It never does. That evening, back in the shop, he oils the gears of a newly finished pocket watch. On the back, he engraves a single phrase, Le temps nous tient tous, time holds us all. He winds it once, listens to its steady beat, and places it on the shelf beside the others, each ticking a slightly different rhythm, like a room full of breathing souls. Outside, Paris glows with candlelight. Musicians play in courtyards, poets recite in cafes. The Seine carries reflections of lanterns like drifting stars. Etienne closes his shutters and writes a line in his notebook. When the hands stop, the memory remains. He sets the pen aside, unaware that across the world, another man is watching the heavens themselves move in their endless rhythm. The night deepens. The ticking of clocks fades into the hush of distant wind. Stars glimmer above Paris and above every roof on earth. Chapter 10. China, the astronomer of the Forbidden City. Far to the east, dawn brushes the walls of Beijing's Forbidden City with rose-colored light. The golden tiles gleam in silence as the great bronze gates creak open for morning prayers. On the marble terrace of the Imperial Observatory, Li Wei, senior astronomer of the Qing court, stands with hands clasped behind his back, gazing at the fading moon. The year is the 39th of the Kangxi Emperor, a time of peace and quiet prosperity. Scholars record the stars for the emperor's calendar, an act as sacred as any ritual. Li Wei's robes are of dark silk embroidered with a silver dragon. His breath clouds in the chill air. Beside him rises the great armillary sphere, bronze rings turning in precise alignment, a legacy of both Chinese and Jesuit design. He begins his daily notes, positions of Jupiter and Saturn, the shifting of constellations. His brush glides over bamboo paper in flowing characters. Though he writes of science, he thinks in poetry. Heaven is a mirror, and man its reflection. At mid-morning he receives visitors, 2 Jesuit priests from the European mission, fluent in Mandarin, carrying star charts from Paris and Rome. Together they compare measurements, translating across worlds with gestures and smiles. In your lands, Li Wei asks softly, does heaven also move for the emperor? One priest laughs gently. For us, heaven moves for no man, but we still watch it all the same. They part as friends. Li Wei returns to his study, passing courtyards where eunuchs sweep fallen ginkgo leaves and scholars read aloud from Confucius. In the Hall of Supreme Harmony, the emperor receives officials from distant provinces, reports of floods in the south, trade in silk and porcelain, new maps drawn by Jesuit hands. As dusk falls, Li Wei climbs once more to the observatory tower. The city below flickers with lanterns. The stars emerge sharp and cold. He aligns the sighting tube and marks a comet's faint trail. Beneath him, Beijing hums, a city of 1,000,000 souls, each bound to the turning of heaven's wheel. He closes his eyes. The stars above him are the same that rise over Europe, over Africa, over the far-off islands of the Pacific. Time, he thinks, is not measured by clocks or calendars, but by the endless breath of the cosmos. When he returns to his chamber, he writes one last verse in his journal. Heaven turns, and earth dreams. Between them, man watches and wonders. Above the roofs of the Forbidden City, the comet drifts westward, its faint light crossing oceans, unseen by most but shared by all. The world sleeps beneath it, each dream another flicker in the great design. Chapter 11. North America, the Iroquois Storyteller. The dawn mist curls over the forests of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the lands Europeans call upstate New York. The air smells of pine and wet earth. In a small longhouse near the Mohawk River, a woman named Awanassa rises before the others, stirring embers in the central fire until they glow red again. She is old now, her hair streaked with silver, her hands strong and careful. Around her, children still sleep under woven blankets, their breath soft and slow. Outside, crows call through the trees. Awanassa is a story keeper, guardian of memory for her people. It is the year 1700. The great Iroquois Confederacy, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, stands between two expanding worlds, French to the north, English to the east. Traders move through the forests with muskets and rum, maps and promises. The old trails are crowded with strangers. Awanassa knows these changes. She has seen villages vanish after illness, rivers renamed on foreign tongues. Yet the stories endure. Today, after the mid-morning meal, she will tell the children of Sky Woman, who fell from the heavens and brought the earth to life. The tale is as old as rain, but it must be told anew so that no child forgets who they are. By midday, she walks to the clearing by the river, a carved stick in her hand. The children gather, wide-eyed, their laughter rising with the breeze. She begins slowly, her voice low, rhythmic. The forest listens. Every pause feels sacred, every breath deliberate. When she finishes, a boy asks, "Grandmother, do you think the people with ships have stories too?" She smiles. "All people have stories," she says, "but some forget to listen to their own." In the afternoon, men return from a hunting trail with deer meat. Women tend corn and beans in the Three Sisters fields. Life moves as it has for centuries. Work, rest, laughter, ceremony. Yet there is unease, too, rumors that more settlers are coming, that forests will soon be felled for towns. As twilight falls, the sky turns violet above the treetops. Awanassa sits by the river once more, watching the water shimmer like molten glass. She dips her hand in the current. "You've seen everything," she whispers. "Carry us a little further." The first stars appear, mirrored in the river's surface. In their quiet light, her people's stories live on. The wind drifts south, crossing rivers and plantations, mountains and sea. It carries songs of freedom and loss, echoes of drums, prayers in tongues once thought forgotten. Chapter 12. North Africa, the Scholar of Fez. Morning sunlight spills over the marble courtyards of Fez, glinting off turquoise tiles and brass doors. The muezzin's call floats through narrow streets, weaving with the scent of fresh bread, tanned leather, and jasmine. In a small study near the Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque, the scholar Ahmad ibn Musa opens a leather-bound manuscript. Dust motes dance in the beam of light falling through the lattice window. He has spent his life copying and commenting on the works of philosophers, Averroes, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Khaldun. His beard is white, his ink-stained fingers tremble slightly, but his mind remains sharp. It is the year 1700, and the city of Fez hums quietly under the rule of the Alawite sultans. Caravans arrive from Timbuktu and Marrakesh, carrying salt, gold, books, and news from far horizons. The scholar's courtyard fills each evening with students, young men eager to understand both the old and the new worlds being born beyond the desert. Ahmad begins the day by writing a letter to a friend in Cairo. He speaks of rumors, Europeans mapping the coasts with uncanny precision, trading posts rising along the Atlantic, and talk of telescopes that can see the moons of Jupiter. The age of discovery, he writes, belongs to those who look outward. But wisdom still grows from those who look within. At midday, he walks through the Medina. Artisans hammer brass in dark workshops. Scribes sit cross-legged, copying Quranic verses in neat Maghrebi script. The air hums with barter and prayer. In a spice stall, he stops to smell saffron and dried rose petals. A young merchant bows deeply. He knows the scholar's face from the mosque. In the afternoon, Ahmad teaches beneath a fig tree in the courtyard of the madrasa. His students sit in a circle, listening as he explains the movements of the stars and the geometry of the heavens. He quotes from Ibn Rushd, "Reason and faith are two lamps that light the same path." One student asks if the world will soon belong entirely to the Franks. Ahmad smiles faintly. "No one owns the sky," he says, "and truth is older than empire." That evening, as the sun sinks over the red roofs of Fez, Ahmad returns to his study. He lights a single oil lamp and opens a manuscript of poetry by al-Mutanabi. Outside, the call to prayer rises once more, blending with the sound of a flute in the distance. He dips his pen in ink and writes a final note in the margin. To write is to live twice, once in this world and once in memory. When he sets down the pen, the lamp flickers, its flame bending toward the open window. The wind smells of desert and sea. Across the dunes, caravans move under a silver moon. The stars above the Sahara mirror those above the Nile, above the Caribbean, above Kyoto and London. Each flicker of light, a heartbeat in the story of 1700. Chapter 13. Siam Ayutthaya, the Merchant of the River. Dawn glows pale over the Chao Phraya River, its surface smooth as silk. Along the banks, the capital city of Ayutthaya stirs awake. Monks in saffron robes file silently past floating houses, fishermen cast nets that sparkle in the morning light, and gongs sound softly from temple courtyards. A merchant named Prazet stands on the deck of his wooden barge, checking bundles of dried spices, cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg, bound for the Portuguese traders who anchor downstream. The air is rich with the scent of palm sugar and river mud. In the distance, gilded stupas catch the sun and glow like captured fire. It is the year 1700, the reign of King Petracha, and Ayutthaya thrives as one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. Persians, Chinese, Japanese, Indians, and Europeans walk its crowded quays. Ships from every horizon bring textiles, porcelain, tin, and tales. The river is its heart, a living artery carrying both wealth and wonder. Prazert's warehouse stands near the Dutch factory, where officials record ledgers in 3 languages. He speaks enough Portuguese to bargain, and enough Chinese to greet his partners with respect. His father once traded elephants to nobles in Cambodia. Prazert prefers spices and silk, lighter cargo with heavier profit. At midday, he visits the Wat Farasi Sanfet, offering incense before the great golden Buddha. He bows 3 times, murmuring a prayer not for fortune but for balance, the Buddhist middle way. The temple smells of lotus and candle wax. The monks' chants rise like slow waves. Later, as the heat fades, he attends a gathering at the house of a Persian interpreter. There, men from half the known world drink tea and argue about trade winds, stars, and kings. A Jesuit priest sketches the moon in his notebook. A Chinese captain tells of pirates near Hainan. Prazert listens more than he speaks. He has learned that in trade, silence is a coin that never loses value. When night comes, he returns to his barge. The city glows softly, lanterns floating on the water like drifting souls. He lies awake for a time, thinking of distant lands he will never see, of maps drawn by hands that have never felt this river's warmth. A gecko chirps, the tide turns, the barge rocks gently beneath the stars. The river flows southward to the sea, where waves meet waves, where stories cross unseen. The moon above Siam is the same moon that rises now over Europe. Chapter 14. Vienna, Holy Roman Empire, the composer's sister. Evening snow drifts past the lanterns of Vienna, settling on rooftops and the collars of cloaked passers-by. Inside a modest townhouse near the Continent or theatre, Anna Keller presses her fingers to the harpsichord keys. The sound is soft, a melody meant not for applause but for herself. Anna is 24, the sister of a minor court composer. She copies scores for him by hand, ink-stained, meticulous work, though her own compositions lie hidden in a small drawer beneath the desk. Women seldom write music for audiences. They are meant to play, not to create. Still, in the quiet hours, she writes pieces filled with longing and light. It is the winter of 1700. Vienna hums with candlelit balls and Baroque excess. Emperor Leopold, the first rules from his marble palace, patron of art and piety alike. The city smells of roasted chestnuts, ink, and snow-damp wool. Through the frost-blurred window, church spires gleam like spears of glass. Her brother, Matthias, returns late from rehearsal, his coat dusted with snow. They've commissioned a new piece for Easter, he tells her, half proud, half exhausted. I'll need the copy by week's end. Anna nods, though her eyes linger on the empty stave lines before her. She wonders if anyone would ever play her own nocturne, a gentle piece she's named Winterlicht, Winterlight. In the afternoon, she visits the cathedral. The choir rehearses a Latin mass, the voices rising in perfect geometry beneath vaulted stone. She closes her eyes. The sound fills her chest until she feels weightless. When the singing stops, only silence remains, clean, eternal, like snow. That evening, as the family dines by lamplight, Anna listens to the bells ringing across the city. Each toll seems to measure not time but distance, between what is allowed and what is dreamed. Later, when all are asleep, she sits again at the harpsichord. Her fingers move slowly, reverently. Music pours out, tender, uncertain, alive. Outside, the wind hums through the chimneys like a second melody, and the snow thickens. She writes until dawn, unaware that her candle burns dangerously low. When at last she stops, she signs her initials in the margin, small, careful, defiant. The flame flickers, trembles, and goes out. Yet in the dark her song lingers, as if the city itself hums the tune back to her. The snow falls quietly over Vienna. Somewhere a river carries its reflection eastward. Somewhere else, dawn prepares to rise again, the world turning as it always does, in time and in silence. Chapter 15. Brazil, the healer of Bahia. The sun rises red over the Bahian coast, lighting sugarcane fields that ripple in the breeze. The air is heavy with the smell of earth and salt, of molasses and smoke from the mill fires. Near the edge of a plantation, in a small clay-walled hut, a woman named Rosa grinds leaves in a wooden mortar, humming softly under her breath. She is a midwife and herbal healer, known across the fields for her gentle hands. Born in Africa, taken across the ocean as a child, she remembers little of her homeland, only songs, the rhythm of drums, and the bitter root her mother once used to cure fever. Now she gathers herbs from the forest, speaks to spirits beneath her breath, and tends both the enslaved and the free. It is the year 1700, under Portuguese rule. The city of Salvador bustles with merchants, Jesuit priests, and enslaved Africans carrying the weight of empire on their backs. Ships from Lisbon bring silk and wine. Ships leaving the bay carry gold, sugar, and souls. Rosa moves quietly among the workers at dawn, checking on the sick. She uses cassava paste for burns, guava leaves for stomach pain, and the bark of paudako for fever. The overseer pretends not to see her work. He has come to depend on her, though he calls it superstition. To the people she helps, she is May Rosa, Mother Rosa. In the afternoon, she walks to the chapel to light a candle before a wooden statue of the Virgin. Her lips whisper prayers in both Portuguese and Kimbundu, her words flowing between two worlds. She carries a secret faith that blends the saints with spirits, the rosary with rhythm. At sunset, she sits by the water's edge, watching ships sail west. The ocean glows like hammered copper. Somewhere beyond that horizon lies the home she never saw again. A young girl approaches, crying quietly. Her mother has fallen ill. Rosa takes her hand, stands, and walks back toward the hut. The night deepens, but her pace never slows. Later, when all the fields are silent, Rosa sits alone by the hearth, the fire painting gold across her face. She sings softly, a lullaby without words. The melody drifts out the window, across the cane fields, over the dark Atlantic, to places she cannot name. The wind rises from the ocean and carries her song into the night. It crosses waves where sails gleam like ghosts. Beyond, in another ocean, another story waits. Chapter 16. The Pacific, the Navigator of Raiatea. Night falls over the South Pacific, vast and jeweled. The stars emerge one by one, clear and sharp against the velvet sky. On the deck of a double-hulled canoe, Tan, navigator of Raiatea, traces the constellations with his hand. The canoe rocks gently. Beneath him, the sea breathes. Around him, the crew murmurs, tending ropes and sails woven from pandanus. The smell of salt, coconut oil, and wood smoke mingles in the wind. Tane lifts his face to the stars, his oldest and truest map. It's 1700, though his people do not count years. They measure time in moons, in voyages, in the births and deaths of chiefs. For generations, his ancestors have crossed the ocean using only the sky, the flight of birds, the shape of waves, the taste of the wind. Tonight, he guides the canoe toward the rising of Matari, the Pleiades, herald of a new season. He kneels beside the small fire pit on the deck, its coals glowing faintly in a stone ring. The sea is alive, his father once told him. She whispers her moods through the water. Listen long enough and she speaks. So he listens, to the hush of waves, to the pull beneath the hulls, to the faint hum of wind through the rigging. The ocean tells him he is on course. At dawn, the crew spots the faint line of an island on the horizon, a green silhouette against a blaze of gold. Shouts of joy echo across the water. They've been at sea 7 days, guided only by memory and faith. Tan smiles but says nothing. He knows each voyage is a circle, each discovery a return. By midday, they reach shore. The islanders come singing down the beach with garlands of flowers. The travelers bring gifts, shell ornaments, feathers, and stories. They trade coconuts and breadfruit, laughter and song. That night, under a sky ablaze with constellations, Tani teaches the children how to read the stars. Every light, he says, pointing upward, is a road. The sea remembers them all. Later, as he lies beside the dying fire, he gazes once more at Matari. Somewhere far away, he imagines other fires, lanterns in Kyoto, candles in Vienna, oil lamps in Fez, all watching the same sky. He closes his eyes. The canoe creaks in the tide. The stars seem to drift closer, as if the heavens themselves are breathing. The ocean sleeps, the stars move silently on, and beneath them the world turns. 1700, still unfolding, still alive. Chapter 17. The Arctic, the Inuit hunter. The world is white. Sky and land blur into a single, endless horizon. In the half-light of morning, Aputi, a hunter of the Inuit, pulls the hood of his fur parka tight and sets out across the snow. His sled creaks softly behind him, dogs breathing in clouds of steam. The sun hangs low, a golden coin skimming the edge of the earth. It is early spring, though winter still clings to the land. The ice groans beneath his feet, thick yet restless. Far away, a seal's breath mists the air through a hole in the frozen sea. Aputi moves silently. He knows the rhythm of the Arctic better than his own heartbeat. Each sound carries meaning. The crack of distant ice, the yelp of a dog, the whisper of wind along the floes. His spear is balanced in his hand, his eyes half-lidded against the glare. Behind him lies a small village, half a dozen snow houses shaped like shells, smoke curling from stone lamps fueled by seal oil. His wife, Nuvuk, tends their youngest child, wrapping her in a coat sewn from caribou hide. The older children mend nets, laughing softly between their tasks. As he waits near a seal's breathing hole, Aputi watches the horizon. The Arctic seems empty, yet it hums with life, unseen fish beneath the ice, birds gliding on invisible winds, the quiet pulse of the sea itself. He whispers a short prayer to Sedna, the mother of the deep, asking her blessing before the hunt. Hours pass. The sun shifts but never climbs high. When the seal finally surfaces, it is like a breath from another world, a shimmer, a ripple, a shadow. The spear flashes once, swift and sure. Then silence again, deeper than before. By dusk, Aputi returns home, sled heavy with meat. The children run to meet him, faces bright in the pale light. Inside the house, the air grows warm with cooking, with laughter, with life continuing as it has for centuries. Later, as the family eats, he listens to the wind moan outside. The world beyond their small dome seems vast beyond thought, but here, in the circle of warmth, there is peace. When he lies down beside Nuvuk, the ice creaks like an old song beneath them. Outside, the aurora flares, curtains of green and violet light waving across the frozen sky. He watches until sleep takes him, as if he is floating among the stars themselves. The aurora fades slowly, its colors washing southward, over tundra and forest, mountain and sand, a river of light flowing into the heart of another continent. Chapter 18. Persia, the poet of Isfahan. The morning light falls like honey over the blue domes of Isfahan. The call to prayer rises through the crisp air, mingling with the smell of bread baking in clay ovens. In a narrow courtyard filled with roses, Farid al-Khatib, a poet and scribe, dips his pen into ink the color of night. He is not famous, not yet. His poems circulate in copied pages, passed between scholars and merchants. He writes of the city, of the Zayanda River, of gardens heavy with pomegranate blossoms, of the soft ache of longing that fills the air like perfume. It is the year 1700, and the Safavid Empire still glows with the afterlight of greatness. The great square of Nakshi Jahan still dazzles with tilework. Though whispers spread of decline, of wars in the west, of Afghan tribes restless at the borders, Farid writes anyway, for poetry is his rebellion against forgetting. His room is simple, a rug, a low table, shelves filled with manuscripts. The ink stains his fingers as he copies verses of Hafez and adds his own lines between the margins. Outside, the fountain murmurs. The city hums, merchants shouting in the bazaar, the clip of horse hooves on stone, the rustle of silk from distant India. By midday, he walks to the bridge over the river, where water glints under the archways. Old men sit playing chess. Children chase each other between the columns. A friend joins him, a philosopher who once studied with the mullahs. They speak softly of time and destiny. The poets, the friend says, are the last guardians of the soul. Farid smiles. Then the soul must be in good hands. In the evening, he visits the home of a patron to recite his verses. Candles flicker, tea steams in porcelain cups. He begins in a calm, resonant voice. The world is a mirror held by wind, and every heart is its reflection. When he finishes, the room is silent. Then someone sighs, a sound of gratitude or maybe recognition. His payment is small, but the applause is enough. Later that night, he returns home beneath the moonlit arches of the bridge. The river shimmers like ink poured over silver. He pauses, looking at his reflection. Time will carry us all, he whispers. But words, perhaps, will stay. Back in his courtyard, he writes one last line before sleep. I have seen the world's face in a drop of water and the sky in a single tear. He blows out the lamp. The night folds gently around him. The river glides eastward, carrying its reflection of stars, the same stars mirrored in ice and ocean, over temples, ships, and silent fields. The year 1700 moves on, one breath, one dream at a time. Chapter 19, Ethiopia, the Monk of Lalibela. Dawn spills across the red hills of Lalibela, staining the carved churches in hues of copper and rose. The air is cool, clean, threaded with incense and the faint sound of bells. In the shadow of Bet Georgis, the church of St. George, Abba Tesfaye kneels barefoot on the rough rock floor, his lips moving silently through the psalms. He has spent 40 years here, serving God in this stone labyrinth of faith. Around him, corridors twist through solid mountain. Light filters through narrow cuts in the rock, falling like ribbons across dust. Pilgrims have begun to arrive, women carrying clay jars of honey, old men leaning on staffs polished by decades of prayer. The year is 1700, in the reign of Emperor Yasu I, the Beloved. News of the outside world reaches the monastery slowly, a drought in the north, a new Jesuit mission expelled from the coast, caravans bound for Cairo. But such matters feel distant to Tesfaye. His world is measured in chants and hours, in lamps that must be kept burning, in parchment that must be copied before it fades. He mixes ink from soot and gum, the same recipe his teacher used. On sheets of goatskin, he writes verses in G's, steady and patient. The earth is old, but mercy is new every morning. Each line feels like a conversation across centuries. At noon, the monks share flat bread and water in silence. Later, Tesfaye walks outside the rock-hewn walls. The land opens wide. Terraces of green barley, mountains breathing mist. He stands at the edge of the plateau, watching hawks spiral over the valley. This, he thinks, is what eternity must look like. Vast, quiet, unfinished. At dusk, torches flicker in the corridors. The chants rise again, ancient, haunting, endless. Tesfaye's voice joins them, one note among many. He feels his heart settle into the rhythm, as if stone itself were praying through him. When night falls, he sits beneath a small window carved into the cliff and watches stars pierce the indigo sky. He whispers, "Even the heavens are a scripture." Outside, wind moves softly over the highlands, carrying the scent of frankincense toward distant deserts. The chants fade, replaced by the hush of sea wind. Sand drifts, waves sigh. The same stars now glimmer over islands far away, where faith wears another face. Chapter 20, Saint-Domingue, Hispaniola, the Sugar Chronicler. The Caribbean sun is merciless. It burns through mist, striking endless rows of cane that shimmer like green fire. The air hums with insects and labor. The rhythm of machetes, the crack of whips, the drone of overseers' shouts. In a small mission house on the edge of the plantation, Sister Geneviève Duroche, a Creole nun, sharpens her quill. It is the year 1700 in Saint-Domingue, jewel of France's empire. The wealth of Versailles begins here, in these fields where human lives are measured in sugar weight. Geneviève was sent from Bordeaux 5 years ago to bring light. What she found was a darkness that never sleeps. She keeps 2 ledgers. The first, neat and proper, records births, baptisms, and burials for the parish. The second, hidden inside the lining of her Bible, holds her true chronicle, the whispered history of the enslaved. Each night she writes by the faint light of a tallow candle. Marie, daughter of Adjoa, born this day among the cane. Jean-Pierre, whipped for speaking his mother's tongue. Her Latin falters, her French grows spare, but her handwriting remains steady. Someone, she tells herself, must remember. At noon, she teaches children in the mission school, some pale, some dark, all too young to understand why their world is divided. She reads to them from the Gospels, her voice soft, her eyes fierce. Every soul, she says, is written in the same ink. When the bell rings for vespers, she walks through the cane rows. Workers bend low, their shadows long and thin. The overseer nods curtly as she passes. He believes her harmless. She kneels beside an old woman resting in the shade and presses water to her lips. Courage, she whispers, though she knows courage here costs dearly. Night descends with the smell of crushed cane and sweat. In the chapel, Geneviève lights a single candle before the Virgin and opens her hidden book. Her hand trembles, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Empires rise and fall, she writes, but compassion must endure longer than gold. Outside, the frogs begin to sing. The candle sputters. She closes the book and exhales, her breath mingling with the sea wind that drifts through the window. For a moment the flame steadies, fragile, defiant, alive. The wind carries the scent of sugar and smoke out over the Atlantic, over ships and stars, toward lands where other stories are waiting to wake beneath the same moon. Chapter 21. The Netherlands, the Mapmaker's Apprentice, Amsterdam. Morning fog drifts over the IJ like breath from some sleeping giant, softening masts and warehouses into smudges of grey and pearl. On a second-floor room above a ropemaker's lane, Lucas van Rijn warms his hands over a brazier and bends once more to the table where Europe is beginning to sprawl in ink. The window glass is wavy, the panes threaded with winter condensation. Beyond it, gulls wheel and cry, and somewhere a bosun's whistle peals 3 bright notes. He taps excess ink from the crow quill, lifts the brass divider, and tests a tiny hop along the coastline of Norway. The movement is light as breath. Each point is a promise. His master always says, "Make it faithfully, or the sea will keep your secret forever." The shop smells of lamp oil, oak shavings, and that iron-sour scent of fresh ink. On the walls hang earlier triumphs, grand wall maps with bannered cartouches, sea monsters coiled among compass roses, the world reduced to a cathedral of lines. The Republic may be small in soil, but its confidence spans oceans. You can feel it here, in the hum of the harbor, in the ledgers stacked like bricks, in the whispered names of places few have seen and none can forget. Ceylon, Batavia, Nagasaki, New Amsterdam, but they say the English call it something else now. Lucas's master, Hendrik Blaeu, arrives with that sailor's gait he never quite lost, even after 20 years ashore. "Storm in the North Sea," he says, shrugging off a damp cloak. 2 VOC ships sheltering at Texel. If their pilots' journals survive, we'll have soundings for half a coast no one trusts. He smiles thinly, the way men do who've seen ships not return. Sharpen the reed. We'll need a finer line for shoals. The apprentice obeys, splitting the nib with the penknife, making the cut precise and true. He keeps the knife keen the way his father kept the scythe, as if harvest could be gathered from paper alone. He was a farmer's son once, but the plague took that life and left him with the uncle who ran errands for a printer. One corridor led to another, and here he is, harvesting continents from gossip and numbers. By mid-morning, the harbor wakes fully. Canvas thunders, pulleys scream softly. Stevedores sing at a pace that keeps bales moving with metronomic grace. Lucas is sent down to the quay with a parcel of proofs for a factor who insists on approving everything himself. The cold nips his ears, tar and brine fill his lungs with the ache of vigor. He passes a ship whose figurehead, an angel with weathered gold leaf, seems to watch him with pity and challenge at once. At the factor's office, maps lie like skins across a long table. Men argue about rum lines. They weigh coastlines against profits. The factor signs with a flourish and presses a seal into red wax, a small sun cooling on parchment. On the way back, Lucas buys a stale bun and eats it standing in the lee of a warehouse while his breath peaks in white plumes. He studies a hull being careened and tries to imagine the curve of the world beneath the keel, the invisible arcs he draws upstairs transfigured into wind and hazard. Back in the shop, Hendrik has returned with a battered pilot book, salt stiff, the margins tattooed with a sailor's hand. Soundings here, the master says, tapping a page dotted with numbers and little crosses. Sandbars creep like cats. We'll fix them in place for a year at least. Lucas takes a deep breath and begins the quiet work of translation. Miles to leagues, fragments to whole, squalls to symbols. He copies the most dangerous banks in a hairline gray, then overlays them with stipple that suggests not picture, but peril. All cartography is an argument, Hendrik murmurs as he checks the northing. We tell the captain what is, what might be, and what we fear. He decides which truth to sail. That afternoon, a man with a scarred cheek brings stories with his rain. Ice in the Baltic, a Dutch pinnace sighted near Archangel, rumors of a French privateer in the Channel. Hendrik files the tales as a magistrate files testimonies. Lucas peels the truth from them the way he peels thin burrs from the reed. When the visitor leaves, master and apprentice return to their stations, 2 candles burning like small steadfast suns. As dusk gathers, church bells rise across the water, out of sequence like gulls. Lucas opens the drawer where he keeps the thing he is most ashamed of and most proud of, a map of a place that does not exist. He began it as a practice hand, a hidden island sketched from symmetry and longing, half Java, half Zealand, a crescent harbor, cupped from a compass circle. Mountains arranged like a poured handful of coins. He knows it is foolishness. But the line loves to curve, and the coast gladly answers. He lets himself draw 3 more strokes of shoreline before he closes the drawer, whispering, "Tomorrow." He tells himself he will destroy it before Hendrik finds it. He tells himself he will name it after no one. Night falls. They sand the final sheet and hang it upon the oak pegs, the paper bowing slightly as it dries. The world held like a sail against the wall. Hendrik shrugs into his coat. "Go home," he says. "Dream of straight meridians." Lucas laughs and steps into the cold. The fog is thickened. The city wears it like wool. He chooses a longer path along the canal where lamps ripple in the black water. Each light is a floating star, each bridge a horizon. At home, in a garret that groans when the wind leans on it, he lies awake, listening to ship bells. He thinks of the invisible mathematics between 2 capes, of currents that pretend to be calm, of a captain's finger skimming the margin where his ink grows faint. He thinks, too, of his island, which waits for a wind that may never blow. Sleep comes like a tide, slow and indisputable, and carries him under. Mist lifts. A lamp's reflection trembles, then smooths. Somewhere beyond the gray, grass runs to the world's edge, and the sky stoops low enough to touch with a gallop. Chapter 22. Mongolia, the horsewoman of the steppe. The morning is a bowl of blue overturned on forever. Boloma stands with her hand on her mare's shoulder, feeling the heat of breath plume against her wrist. The hide's drumbeat thrum beneath hair and skin. Far east of Karakoram's ghost, her family's ger faces south as it always has, door painted the orange of dawn. The felt walls hold the night's fire smell. The air outside smells of sage and clean cold. She is 17, and rides like wind, braided to bone. Her world is 3 colors, the dun of earth, the green that follows rain, and the endless blue. Everything else is motion. Herds bead and scatter, clouds drag their shadows like nets, ravens writing quick black proverbs on the sky. It is the spring of a year no one counts the way city people do. The lambs are old enough to run, and foolish enough not to. Her father lifts the lasso pole and whistles the day awake. They ride out together, 3 horses between them, and an extra pony trailing like a thought. The herd moves as one living weather, sheep spilling around their knees, goats staccato in the rear, cattle stolid as if time were a cardigan they had already put on and would never remove. "Watch the northern flank," her father says without looking. She glides that way, and the mare understands. Haunches bunched, a light spring across a shallow gully, the earth answering hoof with hollow notes. By mid-morning, the wind freshens and a hawk becomes a line the sky draws through itself. Boloma hums a song her grandmother taught her, about Janga and his white horse and the mountain that bowed to let them pass. The song is the only map she needs. It remembers water even when the ground tries to forget. They pause at a rise. The land unrolls, no fences, no borders, only decisions. On the far lip of sight, 5 riders move like punctuation. Traders perhaps, or a neighbor clan circling to new grass. The steppe keeps its secrets by keeping none. What hides here does so by being everywhere. Her brother Temur rides up from the west with the pleasure of news in his grin. "Salt," he says, "and iron points. The traders will camp by the Black Spring for 2 nights. Their father nods. "We'll bring a foal for trade," he answers, "and wool, and see if they carry tea bricks from the south." He doesn't say what Boloma knows. That tea poured thin is warm patience in a bowl when storms sew the sky shut. At noon, they water the herd at a shallow pond, where the wind prints cursive ripples and erases them immediately. As if language were a game it played for its own amusement. Boloma kneels and cups handfuls to her mouth, and the cold puts a bell in her chest. A line of ants visits a dead beetle like a shrine. A lark climbs a staircase of its own voice until it disappears into sunlight. The afternoon delivers weather with the steppe's usual lack of ceremony. 1 cloud becomes 5, becomes a wall, and the wind tilts its voice toward warning. "Drive east," her father calls, and they do, shoulders down, herd huddling and surging like embers disturbed. Rain arrives, not as drops, but as an argument. Then hail arrives to make its point. Boloma leans off the mare's shoulder, 1 hand on the withers, and plucks a stumbling lamb from between hooves, with a movement that has no intermediate steps. She tucks it against her coat, feels the frantic toy clock heart against her ribs, and laughs, sharp, bright, an answer to weather that hasn't asked a question. When the squall passes, the world is cleaner, as if the land had been stropped and now shone with a blade's fresh certainty. They angle toward the Black Spring near dusk, and find the traders already buttoning their tents against night. One is a man from the west, with eyes the color of driftwood, and a hat rim stitched with tin. Another is a woman from the south who smells faintly of smoke and cinnamon. Her pony's mane is braided with red thread. They speak a little of everything and mostly of value. Temur lays out the wool, her father the foal, long-legged, full of argument. The woman smiles and produces a brick of tea wrapped in dull leaf, and 2 needles that shine like captive lightning. "I will give these," she says, and a knife kept friendly by oil. Her father runs his thumb along the blade, hearing what metal says about honesty. He nods. The bargain is not a shout, it is a bow. Night gathers its blue cloth and drapes it over the steppe. The traders sing the songs their roads have taught them. Boloma's family eats boiled mutton and drinks broth that tastes like strength turned into steam. Grandmother has walked out to the edge of hearing and returned with a pocket of stories. Now she empties them by the fire, her voice a slow river. "There are wolves in the far hills," she says, "but wolves hate a good flame. There are spirits who travel in dust, but they like to be greeted as if they were cousins." After the meal, Boloma and Temur slip into the darkness just far enough to let the fire rebalance its breathing. The stars arrive all at once the way geese do, first a leader, then a wether of them, wing on wing. "Count them," Temur jokes. "You'll arrive at morning before you finish." She leans back on her elbows and lets her eyes fall into the bowl of sky until the bowl becomes the only thing, and she is inside it like tea inside warmth. "Our land," she says, not as a claim, but as a gratitude. "Our sky," he answers, and they both hear what the other means, not possession, but belonging. The horses shift, iron on stone, soft sparks in the dark. Somewhere a fox steps between 2 blades of grass without bending either. The wind says its long vowel and keeps saying it. The steppe is an instrument that plays one note forever without ever sounding the same twice. Before sleep, her father checks the guy ropes and the mare line. He glances at Boloma the way men do when they measure not their daughter's strength, he knows that, but the temper of whatever horizon she will one day choose. He sees the hand that lifted the lamb and the back that bent into weather, and thinks about the neighbor's offer to send her with a caravan south next autumn to learn new things and bring them home. He does not say it. He lets the idea warm like a stone in the pocket of his silence. Boloma lies beside the ger, cloak over her shoulders, cheek to felt. The mare lowers her head until warm breath fogs Boloma's hair. "Good night," she whispers in a language without grammar. Above them, the Milky Way spills like a dropped bag of salt. She falls asleep to the hooves' slow arithmetic, and the thought that a horizon is not a wall but a door that forgot to close. In the morning, though that is still a word and not yet a light, the coyotes will print a stanza in the damp sand and the sun will read it aloud, and the herd will choose its answer, and the day will unfold as if no other plan had ever existed. Shorelines harden into lines, grasslands soften into breath. Between ink and wind, the earth keeps turning, and we keep learning to follow it, by stars, by stories, by the sound a hoof makes when it says the word home. Chapter 23. Spain, the candle painter of Seville. Morning drifts through the narrow lanes of Seville, gilded with the smell of oranges and hot wax. In a workshop tucked between the cathedral and the tannery quarter, Diego Alvarez lifts a small brush and traces a halo around the face of a saint. The pigment glows faintly in the half-light, ground azurite mixed with egg yolk and faith. He paints for churches, mostly, icons for altars, scenes for votive candles that flicker through endless masses. Spain stands on the edge of change. King Charles II lies dying, and whispers of succession sweep through taverns like dust before a storm. Yet here, amid brushes and smoke, time stands still. The room smells of turpentine and citrus. Outside, mule carts clatter over cobbles, and a woman sells almonds roasted with honey. Diego hums an old hymn as he paints. He does not sing the words anymore, but the melody steadies his hand. Each candle he finishes he sets upon a shelf, where rows of saints wait to be lit, faith frozen till flame releases it. At noon he steps into the courtyard. The fountain's trickle mingles with the bells of La Giralda. A neighbor leans over the wall to gossip about war and taxes. Diego answers with a shrug. Kings die, he says. Light endures. She laughs, thinking it's cynicism, but he means it literally. When dusk falls, he lights one of his painted candles. The saint's face trembles, alive for a moment in gold and shadow. The wax runs down like tears, shaping and erasing the same vision at once. Diego watches until the wick collapses, murmuring, "Beauty lives in its own undoing." He blows out the flame. Smoke curls upward, carrying the scent of wax and prayer into the cool Andalusian night. Smoke turns to mist, wax becomes water. A river thousands of miles away catches the same first light of morning. Chapter 24. India, the Weaver of Varanasi. Sunrise breaks over the Ganges, flooding the ghats of Varanasi with molten gold. Pilgrims bathe in the shallows. Priests lift copper bowls of water toward the sky, and the city hums, a living hymn of bells, birds, and human voices. In a shaded courtyard near the weaver's quarter, Sita Devi works her handloom. The warp glows with threads of indigo and marigold. The shuttle's rhythm beats like a second heart. The year is 1700, and her city, ancient as time itself, thrives on silk. From these narrow alleys flow garments fit for emperors, merchants, and brides from Kabul to Calcutta. Her husband trades the cloth downriver. The merchants who buy from him now speak English and Dutch, their silver stamped with unfamiliar kings. They call her Benares silk, but she weaves not for them, for the gods, for beauty, for the simple stillness between one breath and the next. By midday, the heat presses down like a hand. She pauses to drink from a brass cup, watching the temple domes shimmer through the haze. A conch sounds from across the river. A boy releases a garland of lamps onto the current. Each tiny flame drifts away, steady and fragile, like a prayer that knows it will be answered only by distance. Her mother taught her that every pattern holds a story. The lotus for rebirth, the fish for fortune, the vine for unbroken life. Sita's favorite is the peacock, its tail 1,000 eyes. To weave, her mother said, is to remember. At sunset, she carries the finished cloth to the veranda. The wind lifts it once, and it catches the light, the silk alive with motion, colors rippling like water. She folds it carefully, presses it to her forehead, and whispers, "Let beauty be enough." Later, she walks to the river and dips her hands in. The dye runs blue for a moment, then fades into the holy current. The river keeps its promise. It carries everything away and gives everything back. When darkness falls, temple bells echo over the water, long and slow. Sita watches her reflection tremble beside the stars, and the night becomes a loom of its own. Threads, wind, moonlight, and memory woven into silence. Chapter 25. Scotland, the lighthouse keeper's son. The wind screams along the cliffs of Aberdeenshire, tearing spray from the sea and hurling it against the rocks. Below, the waves strike in white fury, booming like the pulse of the world. In a small tower clinging to the headland, Ewan MacLeod, barely 16, trims the wick of the great lantern, while his father checks the brass fittings. The storm has been building since morning. Clouds stack like dark fortresses. The gulls have fled inland. The air tastes of salt and iron. The year is 1700, and lighthouses along Scotland's coast are few, lonely sentinels built from hope and necessity. Ships come from the Baltic, from London, from the Dutch ports, bearing timber and salt fish. Many never make land again. Ewan's father, Angus Mac Leod, has tended this light for 18 years. It's the sea that teaches patience, he says, tightening the shutter bolts. The sea and sorrow. Ewan listens, eyes wide. He loves the work, the hiss of the lamp oil, the rhythm of the waves, the small miracle of fire defying the endless dark. He dreams of becoming a sailor, though his father forbids it. The ocean's no friend to dreamers, Angus warns. As dusk falls, the storm strikes full force. The tower trembles, rain lashes sideways. Ewan climbs the spiral stair to check the lantern. The great Fresnel lens turns, scattering gold over the roaring night. Below, lightning flares, revealing black waves leaping like beasts. Through the narrow window, he glimpses a ship, a single mast broken, men scrambling on the deck. He can do nothing but keep the flame alive. His heart hammers with helplessness, but the light holds steady. By dawn, the storm has passed. Debris litters the shore, planks, ropes, a barrel of salted cod. No bodies. The sea, merciful or cruel, keeps its own. Angus kneels beside a fragment of hull and mutters a prayer. Ewan stands beside him, silent. The wind has softened, the horizon glows pale as pewter. You were right, he says finally, the sea keeps what it takes. Angus puts a heavy hand on his shoulder. Aye, he answers, and so do we. That night, they relight the lantern. Its beam sweeps the horizon, slow and deliberate, a single fragile promise written across the dark. The light arcs out across the North Sea, bending over waves, touching distant shores where other hands are at work, weaving, shaping, remembering. Chapter 26. Iran, the carpet-maker's daughter. In a small village near Tabriz, morning sunlight filters through the courtyard vines. The air smells of wool, saffron dye, and damp earth. Inside the family workshop, Laleh, 13, ties 1,000 tiny knots across a loom taller than she is. Each knot is a word in a language older than ink. Her fingers move quickly, guided by rhythm, by memory, by the faint hum of her mother's song. A single carpet can take 2 years to complete. Time itself seems to weave through the threads. Her father trades with merchants bound for Isfahan and Shiraz, but at home their lives are simple. The loom is the family's heart, its tension, its music, its measure of days. It is 1700, under the last flickering years of the Safavid dynasty. War and rumor travel the trade roads, but in this quiet valley, beauty remains a form of resistance. Outside, the dye master stirs a cauldron of madder root. The steam rises crimson. Color is truth, he says. It hides nothing. Laleh watches the red stain the wool and thinks of her own fingers, also stained, also truthful. At midday, her mother pauses to stretch her back, reciting softly from the poet Hafez. Even the thread of life is woven with tears, yet love makes the pattern whole. Laleh listens, her small hands never stopping. She knows the pattern by heart, vines curling into blossoms, a blue river flowing between them. When the carpet is finished, it will hang in a palace where she will never walk, beneath feet she will never see. Still, she weaves with care, because she believes beauty leaves a mark on the soul of the world. As evening comes, the men return from the fields. The family gathers around the fire, tea steams in thin glass cups. The carpet lies half done beside the wall, glowing in lamplight. Her father examines it and nods once, proud. Your hand is steady, he says. One day your knots will outlast kings. Laleh smiles. Outside, night descends softly on the valley. The stars appear, faint at first, then fierce, scattered like silver threads across an endless dark loom. The wind drifts east, carrying the scent of wool and dye. It crosses mountains, deserts, and sea, until it meets the soft hum of another shore where the ocean glows with pearls and salt. Chapter 27. Philippines, the Pearl Diver of Palawan. Morning spreads gold over the Sulu Sea, and the water lies smooth as glass. A small outrigger canoe bobs near the reef, its wooden hull creaking softly. Standing at its edge, Juanito, a young pearl diver from Palawan, ties a cord around his waist and takes one deep breath. Then he dives. The world becomes blue silence. Light ripples above him like a dream half remembered. He kicks downward, the pressure tightening against his chest, the reef blooming below in coral and shadow. He reaches a cluster of oysters and works quickly, hands deft, practiced, slipping them into his net before air runs thin. He rises through the glittering water and breaks the surface with a gasp. The sound of waves rushes back all at once, the calls of seabirds, the slap of water against wood, the distant hum of the village waking on shore. He hauls himself into the canoe, breath shuddering, skin shining with salt. It is 1700, under the Spanish crown. Traders sail through these waters bound for Manila and beyond, their galleons heavy with silk, spices, and silver. But for Juanito, the sea itself is empire, wide, merciful, and unforgiving in equal measure. By midday, he returns to the beach, where his wife Alona waits with their 2 children. She sorts the oysters while he repairs his nets. Sometimes they find pearls, small, irregular, pale as rain. Once, long ago, he found one the size of his thumbnail, perfect and white as moonlight. A priest bought it for the treasury, promising a blessing in return. The blessing never came, but Juanito does not mind. The sea gives what it remembers. At dusk he walks along the shore, the tide whispering secrets around his feet. The horizon burns gold, then violet. He looks out where the sky meets the sea and whispers a short prayer, not for wealth, but for calm waters tomorrow. That night, Alona lights a small fire near the hut. The children sleep to the rhythm of waves. Juanito holds one oyster shell up to the light and sees, for a fleeting moment, a shimmer inside, half dream, half reflection. He smiles, closes it gently, and sets it aside. The sea hums softly in reply, as if it has been listening all along. The tide rolls westward, carrying the scent of salt and fire. Across another ocean, ink dries on paper, the sound of the world learning to speak in new ways. Chapter 28. The American Colonies, the Printer of Boston. The snow outside Boston crunches under carriage wheels. Frost clings to the windows of Briggs & Sons Press, where Nathaniel Briggs, journeyman printer, sets type by lamplight. The room smells of oil, paper, and ambition. Each letter is a piece of lead, cool to the touch, arranged one by one into lines that will outlive the day. He works in silence, save for the clack of metal and the slow creak of the press. Outside, the church bells mark another hour of a city still half asleep. It is 1700, and the Massachusetts Bay Colony hums with sermons and trade. Ships bring rum, molasses, and news from London months old by the time it arrives. The press is Boston's heartbeat. The way truth, rumor, and defiance move through the streets. Nathaniel is printing a pamphlet tonight, one that questions the new taxes imposed by the Governor's Council. The author's name is withheld. Anonymity, like ink, protects and stains in equal measure. He knows what risk it carries. Printers have been jailed for less, but he feels a strange joy in the act. Every page, he murmurs, is a small rebellion. The apprentice, a boy of 12, yawns beside him. Sleep, Nathaniel says gently. History doesn't, but you should. The boy grins, curls in the corner, and is gone within minutes. At dawn, the first copies lie drying on the table. Nathaniel lifts one, reading by the weak winter light. Freedom is not a gift, it is the ink by which men write their own names upon the world. He smiles, not knowing that in 75 years such words will ignite a revolution. He stacks the pages carefully, dusting them with sand. Outside, snow falls in soft veils over the harbor, muffling the cries of gulls and sailors alike. He closes the shutters, the shop now glowing like a lantern in the gray morning. Later, when he steps into the street, he leaves behind footprints that fill slowly with snow, gone by noon, but the words he printed will travel far, folded into pockets and hearts alike. The wind carries the scent of ink over frozen water, across oceans and empires, where another dawn already glows above the green hills of Fujian. Chapter 29. China, the tea farmer of Fujian. Mist folds itself around the Wuyi Mountains, veiling terraces carved into the hillsides, like ancient calligraphy. Dawn drips from bamboo leaves. The air smells of whetstone and green life. Mei Lin, a widow in her 30s, steps barefoot along the narrow path between tea bushes, a basket tied across her back. She touches the youngest leaves, tender, cool, almost trembling, and begins to pluck. Each motion is deliberate, thumb and forefinger, twist, release. Her mother taught her the rhythm when she was a child. Now she teaches it to her own son, Jun, who follows with sleepy eyes and an oversized basket. The year is 1700, under the reign of the Kangxi Emperor. The Qing Empire hums in quiet prosperity, its heart steeped in trade and tea. Below, the valley steams. Water wheels creak beside drying houses where fires are already lit. Men stir leaves in bamboo drums. Women sort and cool them in woven trays. The scent, sweet, sharp, almost floral, fills the whole mountain. By midday, the sun climbs high and burns through the fog. Mei Lin sits beneath a pine and drinks a small cup of last year's brew, the liquid pale as sunlight through jade. She closes her eyes. The taste is her life distilled: rain, soil, patience, loss. Her husband died 5 years ago, carried away by fever after a journey to Fuzhou with a shipment of oolong. The traders said they prayed for him. She believes the tea itself remembers his name. When the pickers gather at dusk, she ties their bundles and weighs them on a hanging scale, jotting totals with a charcoal stick. The buyers from Canton will arrive in 2 days. They'll test the aroma, haggle, pay in silver, stamped with dragons and foreign letters. Mei Lin never bargains harshly. Profit comes and goes, but reputation stays. After nightfall, she boils a final pot over the hearth. Jun sits nearby, carving a whistle from bamboo. The room glows gold, the kettle singing softly. She pours 1 cup for herself and another for the empty space beside her. Steam rises, curls, fades. Outside, the mountains breathe mist again. Tomorrow the leaves will unfurl anew. The world, like tea, is steeped in repetition and in grace. Steam drifts upward, dissolving into the same clouds that travel east across the sea, toward islands, where night has already fallen, and hearts still labor by candlelight. Chapter 30. Italy, the glassblower of Venice. In Venice, morning creeps over the lagoon, turning the canals to quicksilver. Bells from San Giorgio Maggiore echo across the water, their sound half swallowed by fog. On the island of Murano, where fire never sleeps, Alessandro Vetri opens the furnace door and releases the sun. Inside the chamber, molten glass roars, orange, liquid, alive. He lifts his blowpipe, gathers a glowing sphere from the crucible, and turns it gently, his breath shaping heat into form. Each exhale is a negotiation between air and flame, between fragility and strength. The year is 1700. Venice's glory has begun to wane, but its artisans still conjure miracles from sand. Mirrors for Parisian palaces, chandeliers for Ottoman halls, goblets delicate as dragonfly wings, all born from hands like his. Alessandro's apprentice, Julia, watches in silence, face smudged with ash. She's the orphan daughter of a sailor lost at sea, quick with her hands and quicker with questions. "Why do you never make the same vase twice?" she asks. "Because the fire never breathes the same way twice," he answers. "We only borrow its mood." Outside, the canals glisten. Gondoliers call softly through the mist. Merchants from the Levant unload crates of soda ash and cobalt. The furnaces hum like hearts, the island alive with heat and craft. By noon, Alessandro finishes a goblet thin enough to tremble at a whisper. He lifts it to the light. It shivers with color. Rose, gold, smoke. Julia stares, mesmerized. "Perfection," she breathes. He smiles. "No, perfection is dead. This still breathes." When evening falls, they carry their day's work to the cooling room. Outside, Venice glows, the sky violet, the lagoon a mirror of scattered lamps. He walks to the quay and watches his reflection quiver beside Julia's. "You'll take the pipe tomorrow," he says. "The glass will listen to you now." She nods, startled but proud. The city bells begin to ring again, their sound sliding over water like light on silk. Later, alone in the workshop, Alessandro sits before the dying furnace. He thinks of the sea beyond the islands, of ships bound for worlds he'll never see. He dips his pipe into the embers one last time, shapes a small orb no larger than an apple, and seals a breath inside. When he holds it to the light, his own reflection stares back, blurred, infinite, alive within the glass. He places it on the shelf beside hundreds of others. Each glows faintly, catching the last light of day, as if holding the world's fragile heart. Chapter 31. Epilogue. The world asleep. Night drapes itself across the world like a patient hand. Lanterns dim. The fires gutter to embers. The waves hush their endless song. Everywhere, from the frozen edges of the Arctic to the warm lagoons of the Pacific, breath becomes slower, gentler, shared. The year is still 1700, but time has loosened its grip. The clocks in London stop ticking for a heartbeat. The prayers in Lalibela, the chants of Kyoto, the lullabies of Bahia and Venice, all dissolve into one soft hum that belongs to no single tongue. A candle, guttering in Seville, a lamp cooling in Fez, a star reflected in the canals of Amsterdam, the Ganges and the Thames, light traveling, always traveling, never asking who it touches. Beneath it, the world sleeps. In Kyoto, Kenji's lantern still glows faintly, its paper shell trembling in the breeze. On the Gold Coast, Efua's loom rests silent, her cloth folded neatly beside her bed. In Istanbul, Yusuf's last line of ink dries to a silver sheen. In Paris, Etienne's clocks tick through the hours no one hears. On the steppe, Bolorma dreams of her horse running through endless grass. And on the Arctic ice, Aputi lies with his family, the aurora flowing above them like a promise. The same wind touches them all, carrying scent and salt, song and dust, memories of the day that was. A child is born in one corner of the earth as another soul departs in quiet peace. Empires shift in their sleep. Rivers forget their floods. The stars keep watch. It is the hour when the past becomes tomorrow, when the world balances perfectly between what has been and what might be. The night deepens. Owls call in distant forests. The tide sighs against forgotten harbors. And somewhere, a scribe, perhaps in Fez, perhaps in Isfahan, writes the last word of the day, closes the book, and blows out the lamp. Silence settles, vast, living, infinite. The earth exhales, and then quietly, mercifully, the world sleeps. If you are sleeping already, sleep well. If you are listening, may the rest of your night be easy. Subscribe to History for Sleep, and let the next story find you tomorrow.